Let's say you're a product manager and you've been doing an outstanding job and you got promoted to product VP. Congratulations! That excitement might last maybe 24 hours before the reality hits because suddenly you recognize you're responsible for product strategy, team leadership, board presentations, and influencing executives. The skills that made you successful as an individual contributor, they might not be enough to make you successful as a product VP. How do you make this transition? Well, many of the product VPs I've talked with use a professional coach to help them move from doing the work of product management to now leading the people who do the work. Our guest today is one of those coaches that has helped several product VPs. From this episode, you'll learn practical steps to take for making a similar transition from that individual contributor or maybe director of product management, setting yourself up to long-term success into a senior leadership role. Our guest is Rebecca Arora. She's the founder of Access Alignment and author of Somatic Intelligence. Rebecca has a unique background. She was a co-founder and the first product leader at Mode Media, which scaled to become the #1 lifestyle digital media company. She also contributed to product strategy while at Oracle, and for the past 16 years, she's been coaching C-suite leaders and top execs in all functions, including product. Rebecca's clients work at exceptional companies such as Google, Salesforce, IDEO, Pinterest, Blue Shield of California, Accenture, and many more. Her book, Somatic Intelligence, helps leaders align head, heart, and body to lead with awareness, confidence, and clarity. If you're listening to our discussion and would rather watch it, simply go to our YouTube channel, search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in and learn how to navigate transitioning to senior leadership roles right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a treat to be here, and I do love product leaders. So, very excited to be speaking to your audience today and to you.
I appreciate that. And I know this because this is how we're talking, because some other product VPs have said, well, Rebecca was my coach that helped me figure out some things on this transition. But first, just we do have this product connection in common because you have product roles in your background. What kind of drew you to product management, product strategy?
The thing that I really love about product is, in my experience of it, it's like being at the center of a wheel. And people probably think about that in terms of their function and their role. Oh, yes, what I'm doing is the most important thing. But the product really does set the tone for what's happening for the organization, the direction that it's headed. And as a product leader, you're usually interfacing with many different functions.
Hmm.
So it's in order to make the product happen, you have not only external stakeholders, but quite a few internal stakeholders. And so it's that ability to understand and work with the needs and the complexity. I also really love problem solving, and I think
Hmm.
product leaders are great problem solvers.
Well, I guess we need to be, right? But you're absolutely right. That I do like that analogy, the center of the wheel. Yeah, I've used that picture before, like a bicycle wheel in the hub, because all those spokes, all the functions of the organization, we often have to interface with, which means we have pretty good insights of what's going on there as well. So I like finding product people because they often know more about the organization than most other people in different functions.
Yes. And I also think this makes product leaders on a good track to be leaders of the whole organization. Product can be a great path to CEO at some point if that's an interest.
Absolutely. Quite agree. And we have seen some good examples through history of that as well. As we're getting ready for this interview, I told you we often ask, actually, we always ask for a innovation quote towards the end of our time together. And you suggested, well, let's do that earlier because it relates to coaching in some way. So let's do that. What is your innovation quote? And tell us what it means to you, and then we'll get into how it's connected.
Well, I think you queued us up really beautifully in your intro. The quote is from Marshall Goldsmith: "What got you here won't get you there." And basically, all of the skills, the knowledge, the learning, the expertise that you bring works really well for a period of time. And then you get promoted, and then all of a sudden, it's like the goalposts move out. And wait a minute, it's a whole different ball game. And So I think it's really important just to be aware of that, that we constantly need to change, grow, and evolve in order
Right.
to thrive in the next role.
Yeah, I remember going to a Center for Creative Leadership workshop thing. One of these, it was a 6-day immersive experience. And this graph that they showed us stood out to me that there's, when we look at career paths, most people's are a linear line up and to the right, right? And kind of general progression. Some people, there's a inflection point where it radically increases. And that inflection point is basically, are you getting moved into a role where you're now responsible for other people? And
Mhm.
how do you navigate that? And so many of us, I come from an engineering background, we're good at the technical thing. And because of that, we now get asked to help other people. It's like, well, what do I know about the other people? Let me ask you about that transition specifically, right? Certainly, I suspect this applies to anyone making such a transition. But for the product VPs that you've worked with, what is that struggle there between kind of the background as a more individual contributor, maybe even director of a few people, now into you're a senior leader of the organization and this has very different sort of responsibilities. What stands out in transitioning that? What do you kind of see as the key struggles?
Well, I think the big leap that needs to be made is a shift in perspective. And so part of it is if you're managing a product and you're building a product, it's nice because you build it and you complete it and you iterate on it and there's a roadmap for it. But the higher up you go, that expands. And so the level of complexity expands and
Mm,
the degree to which you have to influence also expands. So you're looking now at the whole company, the industry. So perspective is, I think, key in terms of the mindset. And I also think a nice shift, particularly for product leaders, is think of the company and the industry as your product, not just the product you're building. So you can apply a lot of the strengths and skills that when you have, just apply them in a different framework.
I'm smiling as you said that because one of the product VPs who happened to be a guest on this podcast and helped us make a connection as well shared that perspective, right? Like as a product VP, the company is a product, right? The people I am responsible to is really kind of the product that it helps me to think of it in that way. And I'm wondering, maybe this product VP got that from you, I don't know, but just can you tell us a little bit more? Because I think that probably really connects to product people. Like, oh, I can think about the organization now as as a product.
Yes, and I think one of the biggest challenges that I see all the time with leaders is this familiarity with being the expert of their domain. And this is where being the expert can hurt you a little bit. It's not that you want to stop being an expert, but other people really need to be the expert and drive. And so your ability to step back and give space and empower, it becomes more about coaching
Right,
than being the expert, if
right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Instead of having all the answers, maybe asking the right questions and help others. Let's move into that coaching a little bit since you brought that up. There's lots of places I want to go in this conversation. We'll see how many that we can get to. But one of the changes as a product VP is you're now mentoring and coaching others, right? Kind of the role you used to have more. Is this a conversation that you have with people that you coach and give them some insights on this is how you change from kind of doing the work to now being responsible for mentoring others that are doing the work?
Well, I think this is also the advantage for those who are receiving coaching because they are experiencing it. They know what coaching feels like.
Ah, right.
They've observed it. So, in many cases, I am guiding by example. And there are things in terms of the types of questions, they need to be open ended questions. And they are the other part of the questions as a coach and as a mentor is not to fix or solve it for them, really assume that, and sometimes I'll even have leaders like sit on your hands. You might lean back a little bit because you want to get in there and let them sit and struggle. And sometimes that might mean they don't do it the way that you do. Maybe they'll do it better, or maybe they will quote unquote fail. But that's part of the iterative process and in coaching and guiding, not you being the expert. And just maybe an example of this so it's not so ambiguous. One question that I like to ask leaders that I coach is when was a time that you've experienced this before or something
Mm,
similar? And how did you approach it then? And this helps them think through, right? Okay, maybe this isn't such a huge, squishy, ambiguous challenge. I can make it, I have worked with something similar, and this is maybe how it's different. So I'd approach it slightly different. So, just one example of a coaching question that can empower someone that you're leading.
In this, do you find that micromanaging is a habit that is easy for people transitioning to adopt, whether they mean to or not, because they're having a hard time giving up on this notion of like, well, that's not how I would do it. So let me tell you how I would do it, and that you have to help people through. Does this come up as a struggle?
Yes. I mean, well, one of the things that I like to look at is different archetypes, because even though if we're a product leader, there's still many flavors.
Mhm.
And so one archetype, and even in the book, I address these different archetypes. One I like to call the controller. The controller does like to have a degree of control, and they can be very decisive. This is how it needs to be. This, and so when it comes to decision making and ownership, that's great. So they can struggle a bit with letting go of control, but they also can intimidate others and get in the way of mentoring and guiding, because they're the because the other person feels threatened and not comfortable bringing
Right.
the real questions to the surface. So for a leader who's micromanaging, it would be both how to step back, but also how to really ask those better questions so that both you as the leader and the person you're leading can really have a good conversation that moves the needle.
Yeah, I would just imagine that's an easy tendency to have in making this transition that you have to be aware of.
Yeah.
Let's zoom out a little bit here and just talk about something I've seen you write about: people and strategy focused. The leadership is people and strategy focused. Break that down a little bit and maybe share some of the people skills that are helpful in making this transition to product VP.
Well, and this is nice in terms of thinking about different stakeholders, but making the shift requires a greater relationship focus. One of the tools that I will share with leaders, I call it a relationship map. What are the relationships that you need to cultivate in an organization? Who do you need to know? What do you need to, where are those weak? Who do you perhaps have conflict or difficulty influencing? And so both mapping those out, which is in some ways a strategic process, but
Mhm.
also thinking about relationships as perhaps a product in and of itself. Not to Communication, I would say that's also key. Many of the leaders that I've worked with, since communication is not necessarily my focus, will also work with communication specialists, either or take classes on more effective communication. Now, what's exciting, there are many leaders who will use AI to help improve their communication by prepping it in advance. Hey, I'm going to send this out. Wait, is there a better way to word this, depending on what they're trying to work on? If I need to be more empathetic, be
Mhm.
you're asking, whether it's chat or whatever tools you're using, checking on tone before sending. A third piece, so there's the relationships piece, right, which again is relationships and strategy, communication, but there's business savvy, right, where paying attention to not just those in the organization but your industry, being on the pulse of what's happening in
Mhm.
in just the overall landscape, long term, thinking 3 years, 5 years, so on and so forth. So I think these are both, and again, that's why I mentioned the word perspective, because it's almost like you need to, if you're so, and I'm visual. And so, if for listeners who are listening, I'm leaning forward and I have my hands like I have blinders on, which is great when you need to be focused. But at the more senior you go, and now my hands are dropping down and I'm leaning back, I'm expanding my ability. The blinders are off. I can see more. So, this need to be seeing a much bigger playing field and then acting accordingly, to me, is that dynamic
Mhm.
of being more strategic.
Right, absolutely. I don't know if this works at all for anyone listening, but the image that came back to me was the movie Ford versus Ferrari. For anyone that has seen it, there's this great scene, and I forget the driver's name. Is it Niles? Nils? But anyhow, the driver, right? And I've been told by people that were closer to this at the time that the movie's pretty accurate, right? Pretty good. And the driver's talking about what happens at 7,000 RPMs, where you think you would have to be ultra focused and very precise because any small error would be that maybe best an accident. And he says at 7,000 RPMs, the world just opens up and you see everything with clarity, right? And you
Wow.
kind of make this transition. And I like that as you're talking about the industry, right? That it's important to have the blinders on at times to be really focused, but it's also important to have this larger perspective and let things open up. It's a great scene for anyone that wants to go check it out on YouTube. There's a couple of those I would love to spend a little more time with, because as I've talked to product VPs, they usually say something very simple like, Chad, the big thing that changed for me was people. It is all about the relationships and learning what that means and how to navigate that and emphasizing the value of the relationships. So the map is a really good tool for that, to think about maybe relationships at your senior leadership team level that you need to develop and improve, some that might be not supporters yet. What else have you seen about this change when it comes to those relationships in general, relating to the people you're responsible for, relating to other stakeholders?
Because the first thing that comes to mind is there can be a tendency to treat people the way that you want to be treated, which
Mm,
is great if when you think about respect, care, empathy, just curiosity, things like that. But one of the things, and I certainly know this from my perspective as a coach, is we are actually very different and that we have different motivations. So you can't always coach or guide people the way that you want to be guided. And so if you might be very hands off, but the people that you're leading actually might need a lot more hand holding and to be directed. I've coached several leaders that have had to deliberately lean in on that. In some cases, it may mean that there's a performance gap or a talent issue and they can't quite, they're not rising to where they need to be. So that can be an indicator. But in other cases, it's just a symptom of leading the way you want to lead. And so I've watched and supported leaders in doing different assessments for themselves because there's this process, and particularly in coaching, of self-awareness. What are my strengths? What are my values? What are my blind spots? And usually the flip side, and so it's like if you're striking with a sword and you're, I don't know, it's not that work is violent, but anyway, you've got this sword and you're moving forward with your strengths. But on the back side of that sword, if it's a double edge, is your blind spots, your
mm,
weaknesses. And so it's part of the same sword or coin, and being aware of your blind spots, leaning into them, that's where all the growth and the magic really happens.
right.
And so so you have that self-awareness that you're developing as a leader, but then you're simultaneously inviting and encouraging that of your team. So being aware, oh, wait a minute, just because I'm this ambitious achiever and I'm driven, someone else on my team maybe has different motivations. They're more of a helper, and or they want to create harmony. And so if so and so is bringing up something that feels like conflict, this person's struggling. And so just being aware, and this is again the people aspect, that as people we come with our personalities, our life history, and being willing and wanting to expand our range of what we're capable of is really where it's at.
Yeah. So knowing though some way the temperaments, the personalities of the individuals, and how be able to be aware of how they might react to things. That self-awareness aspect of emotional intelligence that makes leaders better leaders, know how they show up to others and know how others might receive that message. About
Yes.
the blind spots, I think this can be a really valuable aspect of just growth in our careers and growth in life when we have others that help us recognize those blind spots. Right? They're called blind spots because they're hard for us to see.
Yes.
As a coach, you might be able to help identify some of these as you work with someone long enough, but you're not in their work environment, right, to have the full picture. How do you help encourage someone to figure out those blind spots? Have you found that it's easy to identify them as a coach, or do you give them other tools? Go find someone to mentor you in the workplace or something?
two things. First, and usually part of the coaching process is a 360.
Hmm.
And this is a feedback tool that we use. It could be the way that we offer them is through interviews. And by interviewing your boss, your direct reports, your peers, other stakeholders, could be board members, so on and so forth, you start to really get an interesting and can just be, and so I'm saying this in case whoever's listening does not have a coach and they want to do this themselves, you can just ask two basic questions. What are my strengths? And what is it that I could improve upon? And I like being vague like that because it will bubble up the most important things. If you ask a whole slew of questions, it's like, well, I don't know. And you really want to get to one or two key things to work on because change is hard, it takes time. So 360 helps illuminate those blind spots. As coaches, we tend to be able to spot, it's almost like everything is information. So the way that someone behaves, whether they're on time or late for a coaching conversation, whether they cancel a lot, whether they how they respond in their communication. So even though in the coaching relationship it's a small microcosm, information is everywhere. Even how they speak, how fast they speak, how
Hmm.
like it's like the data is endless. So I think part of a coach's job is being able to parse through that data very quickly and see the patterns and share the patterns and check it out. I'm noticing this. This is an example. I'm noticing that you seem to jump to conclusions really quickly or make assumptions. Is that true? Where does that happen? What's the cost of that? And so, it, in the coaching conversation, depending on the challenges the person brings up, again, there's a lot of data and
Hmm.
places to not poke, but gently point out, hey, this might be a blind spot for you.
Right. Right. Yeah. To be able to identify those, and I do consider that a great gift if we can get that kind of feedback to help us recognize areas that we may have some things to address or have others compensate, to help us out with our strengths. Okay. So that's really helpful. I remember my first 360 as a leader, and I've heard many people describe it this way, so I don't feel bad. It was a bit of a gut punch, right? It's like, well, I think I'm doing pretty well in these areas. Like, oh, wow, didn't see that one, right? That there are some blind spots in there. And having a coach to talk through that would be really valuable and really helpful. We've hit on so many good topics already for everyone, but for someone that is in this position or wants to be in this position in the future, right, moving into a senior leadership role, I suspect this is kind of the same, regardless of if it's product VP or other things. You're welcome to address that, but can you give us maybe the first 90-day plan? There usually is a little bit of a honeymoon period in the sense of the organization. It's going to give you some time to adapt to this. What are the maybe 3 or 5 things that we should be thinking about trying to get a reasonable handle on during that first 90 days?
Well, I think the first is to resist the temptation to be the expert, to
Mm,
really, and many, I've heard leaders refer to it as a listening tour. So come in with as much curiosity as you can, even if this is an organization you've been part of. In a new role, how can you be as curious as possible rather than assume that you have the answers or what's required for that role, even if
mhm,
it's the product roadmap or whatever the case may be. So curiosity would be number one. I would also treat this from the beginning as user research. So, and again, in that example, this is applied to the organization now. How does the organization work? What are the things I didn't know when I was at the level before? How do things get done here? What is it going to take for this role, aka me, to be successful here now, given that is changed from the prior one? So taking curiosity is number one. Number two would be that relationship strategy that we've talked about, having conversations with other leaders. So this can be peers, but I really encourage skip level up and making the time to find out what their challenges are, seeing if in the future there are ways that you might support them in those challenges, and asking them, how have others been successful? What do I need to watch out for? So, really, just again, number one, being curious, but two, applying it to these relationships and focusing, really doubling down on relationships. The third is that strategic thinking, thinking about the industry, the competitive landscape, and 3 to 5 years out. Now, I think Others would probably have more specifics in terms of what that looks like in the first 30 seconds. But to me, that those are the mindsets or just overall things to pay attention to set yourself up.
Yeah, really good wisdom to be aware of just starting in, right? Be curious, listen a lot. Don't come in with a new plan for changing everything. That helps people be comfortable knowing that you're going to be sensitive to the environment. And even if, like you said, if it's your organization that you've been a part of, it's different at that role. So keep listening, build those relationships with the others that you need to influence and you'll need help from, and they can get help from you as well. And then the strategic thinking piece to maybe just get more aware of your industry and the conferences that you need to be at that maybe you haven't been before, and people to talk with to help out.
The other thing, sorry, just to add to this,
Yeah,
it's valuable, though it may not feel like it, is when you ask these questions and really engage, and then you take what they've given you, build upon it, they're really enrolled with you and in your success. And so your ability to follow up and say, I listened to all of these different people and inputs. This is what I've synthesized. So you're then more credible as the leader. And you've brought people with you. So you're
hmm
not trying to boom, impose something, but actually it's very much a we victory at the end.
right. It's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up. I see few people doing this, and I've had opportunities to do it, and I've missed it, right? Because I just wasn't thinking about it. That when you hear like feedback from someone, or like, here's something you need to be doing, and you actually take action on that and do it. And then you reach out to the person and say, hey, I did that thing you told me about, and here's how it has helped me. And what a great way to strengthen relationships, right? It's a good thing just to do, right? To show respect to each other, but great way to build those relationships. And even if that, like you're reading a book, you can reach out to the author, but people in the organization that are giving you some guidance to show that you're actually responding to it.
Yeah. And they become your cheerleaders.
Right.
It's exciting.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need official mentors. You can have people that just share wisdom and you take it in and do something with it. And it can be really rewarding. Okay, so some really good tactical things to think about the first 90 days, what we might be doing. Along with this, it's a transition. Any transition typically has some level of stress associated with it. And I wanted to get your take on that too, about what's your advice to leaders making this transition to just manage the challenges that come along with that added stress? You may feel the burden of the organization in a bigger way now. You may run into relationships that are particularly thorny that you feel maybe you offended someone, you're trying to through that. There's just more factors that can cause stress on us. What about managing that, dealing with that?
Well, I think the first part is acknowledging to yourself it's normal. And
Mm,
it's almost like the higher you go, even if it's a flat organization, the lonelier it gets. And so it's important to cultivate these relationships, both internally, externally, for that. I think some things that maybe people don't think about that I would suggest is four things. And I've heard one product leader mention this, actually, several leaders that I've worked with refer to the quotes from the Navy SEALs: slow is smooth, smooth is fast,
right.
is to slow it down. So the temptation, and especially when stress hits, we get anxious, we want to move faster, we want to fix it, we want to fix it quickly, but that can often be counterproductive. So paying attention to pace, slowing it down for yourself so you can be both more calm, composed, have the clarity you need, but it also helps slow down other people and keep a focus on things you might overlook. So slow down. The second would be to lean back. And I've already alluded to this a little bit, but a tendency, especially over stress, is to try to fixate or get in the weeds, micromanage. So to a degree, detach to gain some perspective. And when things don't go our way, we get an email we're upset about, or maybe we miss something that we thought we were on top of, it's easy to take that to heart. But if you can really lean back and look at this on a longer time horizon, how big a deal is this really? And also, maybe there's a lot that this small blip is giving you for your future success. So just lean back for detachment. The third would be smile more, because research has shown that actually does change your perspective. For some who really need to, I might say laugh, do laughing yoga. And this just is the segue to the fourth, find humor. So
Mm.
things can get really serious. And when you do both smile, laugh, and find the funny or the humor in it, that enthusiasm is contagious. So that automatically really resets both yourself and the team that you're leading.
Okay, good practical things. We got 4 items there to help us through this times of stress. Love that. Good clarity. What is something that you wish we would have talked about that I haven't asked you about yet, or we haven't uncovered when it comes to people making this transition into the leadership role, right? We hit some of the practicalities of what to do in the first 90 days. We've talked about the relationship some. I'm glad communication came up in there too, the importance of that, maybe working with the communication coach on that and dealing with the stress along the way. Anything else we should hit?
Well, probably because of my experience, and I have a book coming out called Somatic Intelligence. One of the things that I think is the biggest blind spot for all of us is we tend to focus on mindset. And mindset is huge. And many might be familiar with Carol Dweck's book on having a growth
Growth
mindset.
mindset, right?
Very important. But what we can miss is that we also have a body. We're not just heads on sticks. And you can employ your body or a body set to support the mindset. Actors know this. I experienced this from improv theater. So part maybe just using it to loosen up, but I find that can be a fun way to, and I say fun because sometimes change or is hard. And then as a coach in particular, I watch it takes a lot of courage to do leap to that next level, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
may be. And having all the tools and resources we possibly can. And I've observed in so many of the leaders I've coached that this body is an underutilized resource, readily available.
Right. So, as an aspect of that, because I just want a little more clarity about some tips here. I
Yeah.
remember a very popular TED talk several years ago, and I don't recall who did it, but it was a woman who gave it and was talking about power positions for women
Mm.
specifically, but I think in general, right, about to help us feel more powerful in our bodies simply by adopting like the Superman pose.
Power poses.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, right?
Amy Cuddy.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. And so are you talking about some connection with how we're using our bodies in different moments, like how we're sitting in the room or other things? Describe this more for
What
us.
I've noticed is, and remember all the data that I'm constantly watching as a coach, I've noticed that different archetypes, different types of leaders have different patterns. So if I'm a controller or if I'm a perfectionist trying to get it all right, I tend to be a little more rigid and I might be little holding on a little too tightly. So this is expanded to, oh, wait, I could actually be a little softer, a little more
Mm,
relaxed. And if I'm a little more relaxed, how does that change how I'm engaging and leading a team? It can significantly change it. If I'm an achiever, a different archetype, and I'm moving so fast, I'm driven, I know I've got to get this done, and I'm going go, I'm actually running over people, or I'm fixating on me being the expert because I'm the achiever. And so for an achiever, using the body might look like pace, slowing down how I'm talking, slowing down how I'm walking, chewing my food, might not be tapping my foot incessantly, like, come on, let's get. So there's just different dynamics, very subtle. And I love to map it to different, and again, because I think as humans, we are a range of people, we're very different. So power posing is
hmm
not going to work for someone who's already intimidating, but something else can.
Right. Okay, that's very helpful. And more details in the book as well.
Yes,
So, yeah. So, somatic intelligence, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Somatic intelligence.
We'll make sure there's a link to make that easy to find in the show notes as well. But certainly anyone can go to Amazon and find this book, I imagine, correct?
Well, at the time of this release, my suggestion would be to go to somaticintelligence.com,
Okay.
and then you'll know. You can either get a sample chapter or find out how to get the book.
Good place to check it out. Excellent.
Yes.
Very good. Well, it's just been delightful. Thank you very much for talking about these things. I won't ask you for a quote since you already shared one with us. I will tell listeners about work that I'm involved in. This podcast has been going on for 10 years, and I made the decision at some point not to take external sponsor ads per se. But I do like to tell people about the training work I get to do. And it's to help product managers become more professional product managers. And product VPs are the ones often reaching out because they want to show some care and feeding and love, right, to their product managers and help them skill up, help them improve their work that they're doing. And the system I have called the Rapid Product Mastery Experience, the RPM experience, is a great way to do that. So product VPs will say, hey, let's do some training together, skill up, and we'll study 7 foundational knowledge areas that if you are grounded in these, they really do help you become a professional product manager. And along the way, in a group, we'll build collaboration and trust, and people really enjoy that experience. And as an individual, if you want to learn these 7 knowledge areas, you can learn those as well. If you do want to check that out, simply go to productmasterynow.com, and you'll see the training that's available, including the RPM experience. It has been great to talk. You mentioned when you're talking about communication a little bit earlier, and like some of the things you pick up as a coach, just how like someone you're coaching talks to you. I won't ask you what you've picked up from me because it might be too embarrassing at the moment. But from my perspective, you seem to be thinking deeply about everything I've been asking and very thoughtful in the responses. And I appreciate that. And I'm sure when you're coaching others, they appreciate that too. And just wanted to highlight that really love the responses that we got from you. So look forward to looking at that. You're most welcome. Look forward to your book. And thank you for taking the time. And most of all, thanks for helping these people moving into product leadership roles. And anyone that's listening that is in that position, sounds like Rebecca's a good person to reach out to.
Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks for being here.
It's been a pleasure.
For listeners, if you want to find the written version of everything we discussed, including links to important resources, including Rebecca's book, simply go to productmasterynow.com/561. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.